Hello and welcome to another episode of Knight and Craig. I got it right this time,
Hello.
Michelle. I got it
You
right
did
this.
it.
You think with the practice makes perfect, but the saying is not exactly true. Practice makes permanent. So I'm trying to get the permanent before
Oh, I like that.
everything. So I'm trying to make it
I
right.
like that.
So we're in the
Awesome.
in a throes of a series that we're doing called Family Matters, and we didn't really think about when we first started this that we would be going quite so long. And it's not a problem. It's just sometimes topics need a little bit more time to unpack, a little bit more time to really flesh it out, and really give us all a chance to learn and grow from what we're talking about. So today we're continuing on in the same topic and series. Michelle, take us through where we're going to be going in what direction today.
Yeah, so mostly what I want to do is just kind of do a little bit of a recap of what we talked about last time and have some notes. You know me, I take my notes.
You got your
Uh,
notepad?
but yeah, I do. I do. It's fancy. It's got a little fire on there. So, um, but yeah, so we talked about like relationships are really they're never perfect, and that there are um aspects of the relationship that we can't control. And we also talked about we can't expect anything different until we are walking in our purpose. And that's kind of where we pick up today, setting boundaries to be sure that we are absolutely honoring our purpose, that we're giving priority to those things that are priority in our life and not making everything a number one priority, because then nothing is really special. Nothing is really um, true or valid. So, yeah, that's where we're going today. So it ought to be interesting.
It ought to be interesting because, like we were talking about, even just overall about the topic, I think the one thing that hit me enough is our truth enough? Sometimes
Yeah.
when we're setting boundaries, we're talking to people, we tell them we're trying to be honest, we're trying to be open, we're trying to make sure that we're really where we are supposed to be. Is it is it really enough? Do people really listen? It doesn't matter. Do we listen to ourselves and do we listen to other people? And
Mm,
I'm really not sure in setting my boundaries. And we talked about even with your gates out of the perimeter of your home.
mhm.
Sometimes is that gate enough with people trying to push to get in and people trying to um, really do more than they should, being close and inside the perimeter. And I don't know, Michelle, if it's really because the people think they know us well enough, or we've given mixed signals that it's okay for them to come through, or is that just maybe that's just who they are, thinking that they can or want to.
Mm. Yeah, I think there's so much to unpack here, and you're talking about access again, and who people are, and then we talked about show them who you are and all of that. And I think sometimes there are those moments where we might be sending mixed signals. I think for you and I, the type of communicators that we are, I think that we're very clear and intentional about what we want and what we expect. And sometimes uh, people think just like we thought maybe at one point in a relationship, no matter what the actual title, whether it's a marital relationship or familial relationship or what have you, we think that we can change people, and we talked about that a lot in the last
Mhm.
episode, or
Yeah.
that the person can push their will enough to make us change.
Right.
And at the end of the day, you really hit the nail on the head. Where is my truth enough? Am I sharing? I'm sharing with you what I believe. I'm sharing with you from the depths of my heart in a caring way, where I am. And so it's important, just like Maya Angelou, says, when people show themselves to you, believe them.
Yeah.
If they're telling you who they are, believe them. And that may be an opportunity for the other person to reset some boundaries too, because maybe what they want just isn't possible based on the capacity
Mhm.
or where you are in your life. And so it just becomes this kind of pull and give and take. But I think for the most part, people who know what they want are articulating that, and the person receiving that message has to just accept that for what it is and not try to change or manipulate the situation.
I think that's huge because there's so many times, excuse me, in my life where there's people who show me who they are, but I
Hmm.
don't want to believe them because it hurts that they're
Hmm.
not who I thought they were, or even who they said they were. And so in my life, I actually have I don't want to say an odd or unfortunate ability, but I have a fortunate gifting to be able to see future events sometime and people who they are down the road versus who they are actually showing themselves to be at that moment. And so sometimes it can be challenging when you're working with people. If they are a certain way to me, I have to really be able to ask and look 3 and 4 times, is this really what they are right now, or is this really what they're supposed to be down the road if they allow themselves to be? So that can be challenging. So if you have the same thing where you're looking into the best, or you want the best for people,
Hmm.
want the best for ourselves too, and they've
Right.
got to want the best for themselves, and they've got to get there. They've got to make those changes. We've got to make those changes and strides to get to that position, not just give a lot of lip service and talk about it. We've also got to be about it.
Mm. That's a really good point. And this is something that you said when we were talking, that when you realize that, what the problem or the concern is,
Yeah.
you become the responsible person to set that boundary. Meaning, when you realize that the person that you're dealing with, or we're dealing with one another, and you're showing up in a way that is potentially authentic to who you are and to who that person is in that moment. However, that doesn't align with the person that you believe
Yeah.
want to be a part of for a future, then you're at a pivotal point. You're at a there's another word that it'll come back to me, but you're at a decision point where you have to say, everything in me is saying this is not right for me, and it's
Yeah.
not going to
Yeah.
be right.
Yeah.
And instead of pursuing them like David did with permission,
Yeah.
we're pursuing without permission, and
Yeah.
we're pursuing without giving ourselves the respect and the honor of what we're feeling, knowing that maybe we're not fortune tellers, maybe we don't see completely in the future, but in that moment there's something that we should not be ignoring, that we often do for the sake of, well, maybe it'll be different, maybe, and giving them the grace that we want to give to ourselves, which is, well, they're in the process of changing, and that's good to respect, and that's good to honor. There
Yeah.
are certain times where that alarm is going off so loud, and we
Yeah.
ignore it because we're thinking, I don't want to be a jerk, I don't want to be, a money hole, I don't want to, I don't want to be to them what someone has been to me. And so we have to stop and pause and give ourselves the permission to pursue in a healthy way, and maybe in that moment pause, reflect, and then determine how you want to move forward.
I'm still stuck. I heard what you said, but I was stuck when you said a money
Oh yeah.
hole. I was stuck right there because that's gonna be a shirt I'm gonna design that it's gonna have to be a collab between you and I in the
All credit to Steve Knight. Yeah, yeah.
okay.
All
We're
credit
gonna
to
have to
Steve
make
Knight
that
on
either
that one.
some Knight&Craig gear merch, or it's gonna be a part of that. Well, because it's from Steve, maybe it had to be part of the Dad Collective. It, you know what I'm saying? That's
Yes,
life to me,
yes.
because we sometimes, because when you think about people who are that way to us,
Hmm.
sometimes we take that as that's what we deserve, or because we
Hmm.
think we love them enough, or we think we deserve, or we want to be a part of their lives, or maybe they're people who've been in our lives for a long time,
Yeah.
and the relationship, like we talked in past episodes, where a relationship changes, and
Hmm.
that's okay. And sometimes we don't pay attention to the fact that though it's a change,
Yeah.
it may not be a loss, but sometimes we grieve the relationship because it's not what it was.
Hmm.
And it's going to be what it's going to be no matter what. And our relationships need to be that, always the best. And sometimes the best is separation. Sometimes the best is different. It's okay to deal with people with a long handled spoon. But I really love the fact that we've got to always be responsible for what we know and what we
Yeah.
see, and
Hmm.
leaving it at the foot of the other person to be the changer, be the change agent, and do everything like that. Because it is true. In several relationships I've been in, whether it be business or personal, I've seen
Hmm.
flags come up and
Hmm.
certain boundary signs in the middle of those relationships, or at early or late stages,
Hmm.
and they chose not to do anything about them. And
Hmm.
not doing anything positively about them has led to accidents on the road, dangers, or the road has run out and I find myself at the bottom of a ravine or a ditch, scuffed up and bruised, because the relationship was already coming to an end sooner
Hmm.
and there were
Mm-hmm.
some safety flags to warn me, hey, you need to proceed with caution. You should probably slow down and can keep watch. And oh no, they're good people. I'm not going to worry about it. And
Mm-hmm.
found myself in a ditch somewhere. And that not just me,
Yeah.
it's both parties can find
Yeah.
themselves there in a wreck.
I'm glad to hear you say that because last episode and even in the conversation about this particular topic of the boundaries, there were moments where you were slipping back into that ownership of things that were not yours to own.
No.
Meaning there are two people in a situation or multiple people in a situation, but typically those individual relationships are not happening in a collective way. Meaning
Right.
we're not always sitting in an intervention type environment where we're in a circle and we're feeding off of all of these people at once. Typically it's you and another person in a conversation, and then that conversation may be translated or may be carried over into another conversation with other people that you know. But at the end
Right.
of the day, it comes down to your choice and that person's choice that is in that immediate moment. And I was thinking about this. I said this on the call with you, and um, I kind of want to go here, but it may come up again a little bit later. But there's a difference between speaking our truth and honoring the truth, and that honoring is an action. There's a behavior that's associated to what my mouth is saying. There's an alignment
Mhm.
to what I am saying and what I'm doing. And a lot of times we even though adult learners are visual learners, most of us are visual learners first. There's a small group of us who are auditory learners, but I think that we've learned how to when people are speaking, we're hearing, but we're hearing through our own lens. And sometimes even that hearing or listening through our own lens is detrimental because we're only listening to the words that they're saying and not the behaviors that they're doing. And the behavior is a stronger indicator of what they actually believe, because you cannot behave differently than you believe.
Nope. Nope. But some folks like to try to do that as chameleons, and they try
Yes.
to change themselves based on the situations. And I used to be a people pleaser, right?
Mm-hmm.
And whatever a person required to be pleased, that's where I was going. That's how I was doing. And that was
Mm-hmm.
exhausting to have that
Mm-hmm.
type of performance mentality, that type of performance. It's different from having performance anxiety, because if you're actually
Right.
doing things on stage and acting, there can be that type of issue. But when you
Mm-hmm.
have a performance mentality where I've got to be everything that Michelle wants me to be, and I've got to be everything
Right.
to
Right.
what Stephen needs from me, and so on. And there's a difference between when the Bible talks about being all things to all men. That's a
Yeah.
different
Uh-huh.
than or all people. That's a difference there. But we have
Mm-hmm.
to understand who we are first and spend a lot of time staying right there, because there's a humongous cost we had and price we have to pay to be involved in relationships. And I know there's a point we have in one of the points that there's a you're the pay to play, and we really
Mm-hmm.
have to know the cost. And I don't think we really know the cost of each of the relationships that we're
Mm.
playing with and people involved, because there's a high cost in some of these relationships.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So we had 2 points on that. We had you gotta pay to play, but do you know
Mhm.
the cost? And then also specifically, there is a cost to everything, and is it worth it? And
Yeah.
so that's really what we're talking about. Just for a moment, I want to go back to what you said about being all things to all people or all
Mhm.
men, depending on the translation. And the way I interpret that is, meet people where they are.
Yeah.
And I do think that in that the knowing of yourself, the boundaries that you have set for yourself, the awareness, self-awareness that you have. I love Daniel Goleman, emotional intelligence. And so the self-awareness and the relationship awareness and the social aware, all of those things are really important as you're
Yeah.
adding up the cost, as you're figuring out, is this a game that you want to play? And I
Mhm.
don't want to sound like I don't want to minimize life to a game. I'm using that as an analogy because some games, you go to the arcade, they're penny arcades, they're nickel arcades, they're, you go to some adult arcades and you're paying, oh, I know, perfect example. Dave and Buster's.
Dave and
I feel
Buster's.
like
Yep.
that's a little gambling place for kids, like introducing them to Las Vegas. And maybe I'll get in trouble for saying I don't know, but I feel like it's very addictive in there. And so they
Yeah.
have games in there. You can get cards, you can get power cards, and you have so
Yeah.
much money that you can spend, and then you're
Yeah.
determining where you want to play. That's the
Yeah.
same thing in life. And then sometimes you play a game, it's a card game, and you're driving and you go, okay, let me try that again. You try it again, you get a little bit further, get a little bit further. Other games, you're
Yeah.
like, this game sucks. I'm terrible at it. But you still try to beat the game.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I hear my mind, don't hate the player, hate the game. So it's one of those things that the cost to play,
Yeah.
is it really worth it? And what are you getting from that? What are you gaining from that? And what is the long term game that you're actually trying to win?
That's a good question because a lot of us haven't really thought of that answer of what the long term gain is. And I don't know, man, because part of me, what you're saying is there's a benefit to playing right
Mm-hmm.
on the curb. Some of us watch from the window and we spend so much time in life watching, wanting to get involved, but we don't.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes you have to play a game to find out if you like it, to find out if you're good at it. Now, in the analogy that you're using, you spend a lot of money on those games. That there's a
Mm-hmm.
cost of that as well, because you didn't
Mm-hmm.
mention some of them games that Dave and Buster's do cost you because they're power cards now, and they've
Yes.
taken the monetary value and shifted them because the cost
Yes.
of per game sometimes is now $2 and $3 per try. So there's a
Yes.
high cost in doing that.
Yes.
But even dealing with certain people, there's a cost in our time, in our emotions, in our mental space in dealing
Mm-hmm.
with people, working with people, getting to know people and
Mm-hmm.
who they are, and then accepting some of the mindless BS that makes them $8 holes and makes because we have our $8 holes to some people too, mentality to other people as well. So we
Oh
can't say
gosh.
that none of us don't have dollar signs, but we all have that, and we have to make sure that we kind of either minimize that effect on people or minimize their effect on us. And I just
Mm-hmm.
think it's real key that when we're dealing with people we can't exactly be super mad that they show us that $8 sign because
Mm-hmm.
that's who they are, because we
Yeah.
do the same thing to them as well. Not everybody's going to like us. And I think Steve's got a shirt that I gave to him not too long ago that says,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not everyone's cup of tea. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
some folks do like coffee. Some folks we all need to have water,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
but you get really good at pick your own beverage and choose your drink of preference.
And the thing is like even with water, I truly love the taste of actual water now. I didn't before. That
Mm,
was a mindset I had to overcome about poverty and all this stuff.
yeah.
Whole nother show.
Whole
uh,
nother.
a whole different show. But some people add flavor to their water.
Yeah.
They're still getting the nutritional value, if you will, that what water brings. I just probably I could do a study on that later, but water brings the life and growth and all of those things and healing.
Yeah.
Some people like a little flavor in there, and so they're paying to have that flavor, you know.
Yeah.
So it goes back to what sometimes what we all need. It's still, even though we all need water, there is still a customization
Mm,
for the way that we want to live. And I think that customization, sticking with that analogy of relationships, is what you bring, what you're willing to accept, your personality, the personality of those in your circle. I hear so many different speakers saying, show me your friends and I'll show you your altitude, or I'll show you where
yeah.
you're going if you're looking at that crowd.
Mm,
And so when we can recognize who we are and our role in a relationship,
yeah.
then we're looking at the value that
Oof.
we bring. And you and I were talking about value and worth, and there may be some controversy around this, but I it was downloaded to me that value is not something that someone else can determine about you.
Right. Right.
It's inside of you. And
Yeah.
oftentimes when we say, "Girl, know your worth," brother, step up, your worth, there is a part of that with
Yeah.
value and worth for ourselves is really important. But typically what happens is we allow people to determine our worth by the value that they place on
Based
us.
on us.
And that is, night one and one, as my daddy would say, page one and one. uh we have to be careful because the
Yeah.
value is inside of us, and we
Right.
are determining the worth of that value when we show up in our
Yeah.
most authentic, in our most real, in our most connected way to self, that then translates to our relationship with
Yeah.
others.
No, that's huge. And we have to understand that there's worth that we're assigning to something, right? Because
Hmm.
the worth is subjective. Because we talked
Hmm.
about selling cars and or buying cars, buying jewelry, or doing anything, there is a certain worth that we place on
Hmm.
that value, right?
Hmm.
So if a certain item is valuated at, I don't know, 10 or $15,000,
Hmm.
to some people, they would think that it's worth more than that. And to other people, it's worth a whole lot less.
Yep.
And that's one thing we always have to understand with ourselves. We are always worth more
Mm.
than what other people may think that we're worth. But because like you mentioned, the valuation is that we don't even have a worth place a high worth on our value. And that's
Mm.
tough because I've come from that world of
Mm.
feeling worth less, right?
Mhm, mhm,
Than
mhm,
understanding the value. Because if I call myself a child of the King, I'm built and created in the image of God, and and beautifully
mhm,
and wonderfully
mhm,
made. If I believe those,
mhm,
not just say those, if I believe those things, then I have a higher value than the
mhm,
what I believe I'm worth. So when I get
mhm,
up and I think that I suck or I'm tired and if things aren't going my way, well, things may not be going my way, but doesn't mean that I suck. I may have made a mistake. I may have not been
right.
the best that moment or the yesterday, but because I'm alive and breathing today at this moment, it means I've got a chance to do better and increase the worth in my mind to get closer to
Mhm.
my value, right? And so
Yes.
if I can
Yeah.
do that, always chasing my value for what my perception of my worth is, eventually they'll become close to being aligned. But I'm not sure if
Mm,
we can ever get our worth there because I believe that as we become better and as we as a person getting closer to our goals and closer to what the Lord would have us to be, I believe our
mhm.
valuation increases. So I don't
I would.
believe it's possible. I don't think it's possible for us to think that we're worth more than God places of value because He believes in us, period, unconditionally. But until we
Mhm,
get to that point where we understand our worth equals God's value, but if we keep
mhm,
chasing it, I think we'll be much better off mentally, much better off physically, and how that even translates to our bodies physically because of
yeah.
how our mind controls our body's performance.
Mhm. There's so much there that you've touched on, and the the valuation piece is sticking out to my brain right now, because there are trained evaluators.
Mm,
There are people that's what they do.
yeah,
They determine the value of something, particularly with tangible items or
mm,
antiques, or
yeah,
and we
yeah.
bring these items to them to tell them to determine the value. But in that, it may not change what we think it is worth, because if I have there's different levels, I guess, of worth too, or value. We talk about sentimental value. You and I are both very
Yeah,
sentimental
yeah.
people. Um, so yeah, I don't get it twisted. I love a good diamond. Do not get it twisted. But and if with my first engagement ring, it was a peridot stone and crystals around it. Now I have almost a 3 carat diamond ring total, total carat value right now for where we are right now in our life. But I still wear that peridot with the crystal because of what it represents in terms of a newness of life for me.
Sure.
And my husband actually bought that ring for me. My other two marriages, I believe that someone bought the ring for him to give
Mm.
to me, or I paid or helped to pay for the rings for us to exchange in the other marriage.
Wow. Wow.
So
Wow.
the cost doesn't necessarily match the value,
Yeah.
right, that I
Yeah.
would place on it, but the sentiment and the connection to the
Yeah.
meaning of what my now engagement ring is worth is
Yeah.
so much more, because
Yeah.
I understand what it took to get that.
Yeah. But that took time. You invested in that relationship. You invested in that space, and you saw you and Stephen grew to know that each other were a safe place. It was beyond
Yes.
just the physical value or
Yes.
the physical
Mhm.
worth that you placed on
Mhm.
your time. It became the
Yes.
sentiment that grew over time. And I think
Yes.
that's amazing. You mentioned people who were evaluators. My mind went right to those appraisers. You talked about
That's
appraising
the word
jewelry.
I'm looking for. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah,
appraiser?
yeah,
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 I
yeah.
looked at even home appraisers too, right?
Mhm,
Because
mhm, mhm,
as a real estate, I'm not a real estate person, but I've always heard them say it's all about location, location,
mhm,
location. And I look at where we are with people, with places, with things, with relationships. Where are we placing ourselves? Who are we
mhm.
placing ourselves around? Who are we allowing to place themselves around us? That's going to change our valuation up or down. So we have to really
Mhm.
be careful and be good evaluators or good appraisers of the people who we allow to be in our space
Yeah,
on a regular basis and to take
yeah.
counsel from. Because if we're dealing with people who are taking down our property value, but just who they are, we need to not spend a whole lot of time there because our value is worth more, period. Has a greater worth than when we're alone and away from that group, than
Mhm,
when we're good. You mentioned a few statements back, you mentioned about show me your friends and I'll show you your altitude. That's the
mhm, mhm,
same exact thing. If we're mentoring a person that we're trying to help get to the next level in their life, that's a whole different story. But a lot of us
yeah,
have friends that we're taking counsel from, that we're trying to please, that
mhm,
we're spending our life with, doing life with, that are really taking down, and they're keeping us from being able to fly. We're having to dim our light and dumb our life down for other people. And
mhm.
Sean, I don't know about you, but I'm tired of doing that. You can miss me with all that now. I've done that enough over the course of my life.
Yes.
I want so much more because I know there's
Yeah.
more. And when we become tired of being sick and
Mhm.
tired, our
Right.
thirst for life will make us drink from the waters of life. So once we get
Mm,
that change that attitude to move forward, we're going to then
mhm.
eventually be around people and discover a tribe of people that are of the same mindset as us. And so then it becomes easier to see the valuation of our lives.
Yeah. So you and I were talking about this as well, and owning our part in the pain. We also have to own
Yeah.
our part in that stuckness that
Yeah.
I talk about quite a bit. And I was sharing with you that part of owning our pain is owning our part in the pain, meaning our part in the relationship. I did I guess it might be a podcast or a recording or what have you on my YouTube channel. And I was talking about forgiveness, and
Yeah.
that there are 5 parts to forgiving. It first starts with acknowledging what needs to be forgiven, and then second part is really owning your part in that. And it doesn't mean that as a domestic violence survivor that I deserved to be beaten, or that I deserved to be cussed out, or that I deserved to, be kicked or stolen or from, or whatever that experience looked like.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting that you deserved to lose people in your life or to be
Mm.
mistreated.
Right.
Not at all. What I'm saying is, in those moments where that alarm is going off
Mm.
and
Yeah.
you decide to ignore the alarm, punch in the safety code, and even though there's a burglar right inside of our home, we have to own why we did that. We have to own why we ignored that particular call out, for the sake of not knowing our worth, for the sake of not knowing our value, for the sake of holding on to someone because we had someone, that holding on to this, the idea that, discomfort is better than stepping out of this discomfort. Excuse me, is more safe than stepping out and seeing what's on the other side of this, because that causes me to grow, that causes
Mhm.
more change. And for some of us, sometimes our mindset is whatever we get next is going to be worse, so I should just stay with the devil that I know. Stay
Mm.
comfortable here, because I can anticipate coming into my house and seeing what items are going to be missing, because I know I live with the drug addict. I can be comfortable knowing that he's going to hit me because I'm giving my opinion, and I know I'm opinionated. I'm gonna stay in this discomfort because I'm scared of the unknown. I'm fearful of the unknown. And
Yeah.
so when you talk about being sick and tired of being sick and tired, some of that is owning our part in why we're saying, identifying that pattern, understanding that, life on the other side of this will probably be so much better. It doesn't mean that it's not going to be a struggle to get there. And you mentioned too, sometimes people just don't want to work, and I get that also. As it relates to my personal life, I had to get to that point where I was sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I've never had a problem with working, but I found myself still staying while I was working in my brain, and then that caused me to stay too long, because then I wasn't doing the actions that I needed to do. Have I learned from that now? Absolutely. But in those moments,
Yeah.
recognizing where we are, what is that pattern? Getting off of that X by owning our own pain allows us to then get to that next step, which is really forgiving that other person. And oddly enough, forgiving ourselves sometimes comes after that. And
Yeah.
that is equally important.
Forgiving ourselves is everything at the end, because a lot of the times if we don't do that, we're stuck, man.
Hmm.
We're stuck. Because I love everything you said there, because I know a lot of times we don't want to forgive ourselves, because really that's the hardest part, because that's where the regret and blame lives, that we
Hmm.
deserve to be there, and that's why that situation happened. So I'm going to stay right there. But it's not it's not some place we need to be. And like you said, it takes a lot of work to have a
Hmm.
positive mindset every moment of every day, because it's not going to happen every moment. But as the
No.
negative
Right.
mindsets come, just to be
Hmm.
able to realize it quicker and begin to dig
Hmm.
yourself out of it. Oh, sometimes at
Hmm.
the end of a day, I feel exhausted, and
Yes.
I don't do heavy lifting. I don't work in the construction business. I don't dig ditches.
Hmm.
I'm not even an athlete out there playing a sport trying to get my body in that kind of razor sharp condition. But there'll be
Right.
moments in the end of our day where I'm just like, I need a nap, because we're trying to keep our minds
Yeah.
straight, right?
Yeah.
And I don't care how much money you have or don't have, it has nothing to do with that level of mental fortitude, mental toughness, what mental focus, whatever you want to call it. It's all about making sure that what you're thinking is a good thing. And what we're
Yeah.
spending our mind being occupied with is a good thing, because
Yeah.
sometimes it's just not. And if we don't get that settled, we're not going to be able to fix the boundaries around our life, because sometimes, and we hadn't talked about this before, but I'm just feeling it now, is there's a
Hmm.
boundary around our thoughts in our head that we need to also place, to make sure that we can own our part of every situation, because we don't
Hmm.
own and put some boundaries around the negative thoughts, we're going to be jacked.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's a couple things that we did talk about, and it kind of goes back to, one of the things that is managing expectations.
Mm,
It's
truth.
managing expectations of ourselves. And honestly, people, this may be another controversial thing. You cannot manage other people. You can't. You can't.
No, no.
And and we were like, I'm disappointed because such and such did this. Okay, well that's who they are. And okay, you can share your disappointments,
Yeah, yeah.
but that's who they are. And I'm not saying that the other person is always the person in the wrong. It goes the same thing
No, no.
for me. we will not ever do everything the way that everyone
Mhm.
wants us to, and I will not do everything the way that everybody wants me to.
Sure.
And so that's a part of the human experience. That's what makes us beautiful and scary and exciting and troubling and all of those things, because
Yeah.
all of our
Yeah.
experiences are shaping us. Our lived experiences are shaping us from the time that we're babies. There are things that are coming at us that are shaping us, and once we get a little bit older, around, do you understand that I've had the same personality since I've been 5? You've
Really?
been you have been you since you were 5.
It's been a long time since 5, yo.
What did you do at 5 to get your way?
I was a perfect child, so I just asked
You know
nicely. I
what?
said, "Please, please, and thank you."
Mm-mm. No. What did you do to get your way when you were 5?
Probably cry, probably throw a temper tantrum, probably,
Okay.
probably.
So so who is Tyrone?
Ooh, that's a yeah. See Tyrone, he came along later because as a perfect child that I was, Tyrone wasn't inside there. No, I'm kidding. No, but Tyrone is the
Right?
part of me that gets angry. He's the one that well,
Temper
he's the
tantrum.
champion, right? He's the one
Temper
that comes.
tantrum.
Yeah. He's the one that comes out when I'm not getting my way or someone's taking advantage of me. So Tyrone
Yes.
steps in to be the protector
Yes.
because
Yes.
sometimes that little kid Craig, he just, he'll take an L and not learn a lesson. He'll take the L because it's just I deserve to be less and treated less.
I
You know.
understand. Tyrone has always been there. You just
Yeah.
called him, you just have a name for him now.
Sure.
But it's the same behavior.
Yeah.
It's the same behavior. And so we can't manage other people. We have to just manage ourselves,
Yeah.
because everyone has that. Everyone has a
Mhm.
Tyrone, everyone has a shell, we all have it. And what we do in relationships is we're gauging and assessing,
Yeah.
is Tyrone, does Tyrone and Shell, is there enough of them in there that I can deal with that, or is that
Mm.
just too much for me to deal with
Oof, that's
as the
good.
person in relationship,
Yeah.
with me?
I think you hit it too because you also mentioned when we were talking offline too that there's never an equal exchange in relationships because what forces Tyrone and Shell from Dago to come out is that we're not getting the parts of us that we really want from the relationship, right?
Yeah,
And I know you always
yeah.
mentioned your counter to that. I said, yeah, it's always 100 and 100, and if both parties aren't giving their best to the relationship, it's never going to work.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, that sucks because and another point that you made I thought was also great is that in those
Mm,
times when we don't get our way, I think
mm-hmm,
we can let ourselves get detoured
mm-hmm,
because then we start to reevaluate what those relationships are all about. And sometimes it's a detour sometimes because if you're in a marriage relationship that you know you're supposed to be in, and if both parties are not doing their part, there's
mm-hmm,
going to be a detour if you're not
mm-hmm.
careful. And that's tough.
And it
That's really
happens in our
tough.
friendships too. In our
In our
family ships,
friendships.
it happens.
Oh,
And it happens anytime you are engaged with someone else, period.
someone else.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
oh, I hate this. Uh, It happens with our own selves, with those barriers that you're talking about in our brains, the negative self-talk, the I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough. Why did I let
Mhm.
this happen? I'm owning too much, I'm taking on too much. It's just, it's like, that's overwhelming. It is
Yeah.
absolutely exhausting. So no, you're not a forklift driver. You're not a concrete mason person. You're not building. But I'm
Yeah.
not building buildings like that. And
Yeah.
that's part of the reason why we're exhausted, because of
Yeah.
all the things that we're managing, including ourselves. And in this way, when I mean managing, we have kids that are still at home, and even though I'm an adult and my mom doesn't manage my schedule, manage my life, now sometimes
Right.
the roles seem reversed, where I'm like, Mom, what are you doing to be sure she's safe? So I'm not
Sure.
saying managing your home, or prioritizing, or making sure things run smoothly, or addressing those things that need to be addressed is not a part of managing expectations. I'm saying that we can't control people and what they do and then hold them to the standard of what we would have done, because for what we would have done still may not be what someone else would have wanted us to do.
Oh
So
gosh, yeah, yeah,
communication
yeah.
communication has to take place in relationships with others and with ourselves to understand what it is that we do actually expect. Is
Oh
that
my gosh,
realistic? Is it realistic for the capacity that you have, for the capacity that you're expecting this from
yeah,
someone else? Is it
yeah.
realistic? Is it time? Can you go out and get that Lamborghini right now?
Now I get a little Lamborghini Hot Wheel.
Right, right. So some things happen in time when we set our intentions and look at our desires, why we want it, why is it important? What is it? How is that going to impact or influence us in the future? Looking
Yeah,
down the road, you brought this up earlier, and I know it's going to come up again, is down the road when your gut is screaming, here it goes. Ha. You get the alarm after you've been burglarized, vandalized, or
yeah,
attacked, right?
yeah,
So in that moment, you hear that alarm going off because something is not resonating with you, something is not aligning within your heart, your spirit, your
yeah,
soul, your body. And you can see 10 years down the road, there's going to be an outcome of this that I don't think I like this. This is not going to be
yeah,
good for me.
yeah.
But we don't stop.
Ah,
Don't stop.
yeah.
Code, I'm safe, and the burglar is in your home.
And I love it. The other one that you had mentioned too, we had talked off camera when in our planning session. I
Mhm.
understand the promise, but so often we manipulate the plan because do you mention we can see the problem down the road. We know there's a promise for our life. We know we've got a goal. Some of us don't even promise. Some of us are just goals and objectives, our wants, desires that are beyond the physical. It's I have a goal of
Yeah.
what I want for my life. But sometimes we don't think we're getting there fast enough. We align
Mhm.
ourselves with people or allow people to come into our lives that have
Mhm.
nothing. Some cases we believe is going to help us get to that plan faster,
Mhm.
but really they're the ones that are keeping us from that plan. So we've got to be very careful in manipulating that plan. We've talked a lot today about what is the manipulating of that plan. We can't do that. I know we're
Yeah.
co-creators with Christ, but
Mm.
we got to let him create, let him cook.
Yeah. This specific message came to me, and it's also on YouTube, but it's in different parts of series.
Mhm.
And I was in had been in some really tough relationships, and there was some realizations that I had. I think we shared in like one of the first or second episodes around. I realized that I hadn't really been by myself since I was like a or mid-teen,
Okay.
and I knew that marriage was for me. I knew that there was going to be there's always a journey, and I knew that there were going to be some challenges, but I was
Mhm.
willing to accept some of those challenges because I'm like, nobody's perfect. But at the end of the day, in my
Yeah.
adult marriage relationships, I ignored a bunch of red flags, believing that the goal, number one, was to be married, and the promise that was for me was that I would live a better life than what I had lived before. So
Mm.
while I was actively looking for this knight in shining armor to take me away, when the
Yeah.
one appeared, it mirrored and matched what I was already believing about what my life was going to be. And in doing so was the worst season of my entire
Mm.
life. It was the season where I was abused in every way. My children were exposed to domestic violence. My family was torn apart. My friends were um estranged because they tried to warn me in some way, but it came
Sure.
across with some of them as more of a jealousy that I had another somebody versus the warning that if it would have I don't know, it was meant to be. So let me not appraise that right now or evaluate that differently. But what ended up happening is I knew, my gut was sure the truth was the truth, the knowing was the truth, and the truth was not going to change, that I ignored. And I understood what the outcome was supposed to be for the positive things that were supposed to happen in my life, but I was manipulating the plan, which means that I was
Mm.
altering and detouring my life because somewhere along the line, I thought I knew better than God. Somewhere along the line, I thought I knew better for myself and that I could devise a plan that would be better than the plan that has already been set from the time of my birth. I do believe in destiny. I do believe in calls. I do believe in all of those things. So, how do I know what I need? How do I not know what I need? How do I think that I know what I need better than the one who created me? And that's what that is about. Understanding what is for you,
Yeah.
and thinking we're smart enough to get there on our own, not realizing that there's
Yeah.
been a path that's already been paved.
Yeah.
And my job is to get back on that path so then I can have those things and have them in the time that I'm ready for them. So waiting is a part of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Waiting is key. Sometimes what there's a waiting and then there's knowing when to stop waiting,
Mm,
because you're already going to know, because you're looking for the outcome, right? You should know that, okay, I need to go now. And that takes a lot of discernment. I've spent a lot of
mhm,
time in my life waiting, waiting,
mhm,
and waiting. And I think business opportunities have come, other types of friendship opportunities have come, and I've waited and not proceeded. And it takes a lot of discernment there, to
mhm.
know the difference. Because if we're waiting, sometimes we have to ask ourselves, are we waiting because we're afraid?
Right.
Or are we waiting because that opportunity that's in front of us is not the one we're supposed to proceed out of?
Absolutely. And that's the knowing. That's literally it's it's this. It's
Mhm.
knowing that indescribable feeling of go this way, not this way, that we override is always the truth.
Yeah.
And the truth
Yeah.
doesn't change.
No.
The truth stands on its own. And no, and everybody recognizes the truth. Even though in psychology we tend to believe a lie before we believe the truth,
Mhm.
brain thing. Oh. However, you know the truth because it resonates in a different way.
In a different
So
way.
we have to stop ignoring the truth about who we are going to become by waiting and by actively moving forward while you're waiting, because there you don't have to blow the plan out the water to make progress. You know what I
Right.
mean? There's some
Yeah.
steps. We talked about some steps in that one of our episodes, but the steps that you have to take, you can begin taking some of those steps, as long as it is aligned with while you're waiting for the that leap, for that opportunity to leap into where you are. Doesn't mean you have to be stagnant while you're waiting. I don't recommend that either. But I think it's what I want to say is there's a connection to truth and knowing, and not ignoring that by dismissing the alarms that are going off to to then manipulate this alarm going off into being what you think it's supposed to be, and it's not.
It's not. Yeah. Yeah. I love that, because if we don't prepare, right? What's the saying says, get ready or be ready so you don't have to get ready.
Yes.
If I want something else for my life, then I've got to be prepared and so I can, and be ready for when my opportunity comes. Working on a new
Right.
clothing line right now. So I'm
Hmm.
spending a lot of my day mentally walking through what that looks like. I can't
Yeah.
wait for someone to come around and say, "Hey, I hear you have an idea for a clothing line. Let me see it." Oh, let me go develop it real quick. No, I've got to go make those changes, make those shifts, and
Yeah.
produce some clothing, produce it so it's ready for when the opportunity comes to actually present it to someone who's also looking for what I've
Yeah.
got. Then that's going to be really where my time is to move, because if I
Right.
can't move without anything, you know what I'm saying? I can't walk without any shoes. Well, you can, but you're not going to get too far comfortably
Right.
without some shoes.
Right.
So I gotta put on my walking shoes. I gotta get ready
Yeah.
to go. I gotta prepare for something better.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And that takes vision, and that's another way of getting off the X is when you realize that the view of your life right now is not the vision that you have, right?
Yeah,
um, how I see myself in the future is completely different. Yet I feel very much aligned with the steps that I'm taking to get to that, to get to that vision, and
Yeah.
to see
Yeah.
that come to pass. And there's a cost for that as well, you
My
know.
gosh. And I love it because what you're saying too, because I think as we're dealing with family matters and
Mhm.
as we put all these things together around relationships and how do we put together, we have to all understand that sometimes we may be waiting on relationships to get better.
Mhm.
Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And I love what you've said in past episodes that when there's a catastrophic change or shift in a relationship,
Mm, mhm, mhm.
that relationship is basically done as it was at that moment of explosion.
Yeah, yeah.
But for you to recover, you have to
Mhm.
start a new relationship with that person if both parties want that.
Yeah,
If they don't, then that's just too, you just got to keep it moving, you know. But we have to be able to really understand our worth and our value,
yeah.
and they're different in especially in that relationship and dealing
Absolutely.
with who we are as people because we can't stop dealing with people because we're a people,
Yeah.
you know. And you've mentioned before sometimes that even changing ourselves and
Mhm.
managing ourselves is tough. And there's a we talked about too, there's a cost you have to pay to play even with dealing with yourself
Yeah.
because
And
it takes go ahead.
no, 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 go ahead.
Because it takes a lot to grow and become better, right?
Mhm.
And it's a lot, Shell, and sometimes you just have to get the rest you need, the nutrition you need. There's a lot of steps in this process of this thing we call life.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, we were at dinner last night, and the whole thing of the establishing a new relationship came up. We were with our all of our kids that are at home, and their one of their kind of best friends and the grandma. And so the young man was talking about his relationship with his brother-in-law, and when his sister had gotten was dating this guy, and for a long time, and the sister and the guy lived in a different city, so they weren't seeing them. So when
Mhm,
they got married and they came, the young man at the time, maybe this is 3 or 5 years ago, he was still a minor, and he goes, "Oh yeah, that's my sister's boyfriend." And the husband puffed up, "I'm not her boyfriend. I'm her husband. You don't respect me. If you was my brother, I'll pop you in your mouth, whatever, you know." And I said, "Ooh, that sounds like a very insecure person."
mhm,
It's because the relationship had changed, but he didn't know it.
mhm,
To have recognized it in that moment, and also he didn't know that that was a trigger for this guy. Well,
mhm,
because they didn't. Anyway, I have my own theory about that. I'm just gonna say, ladies, don't elope. Try not to do that, because I did it. And what I've learned as a growing from that relationship is that people already have a difficult time respecting our relationships, our
mhm.
marriage relationships, especially family, because they believe that if I'm your sister, I'm your cousin, then I have to change for my husband, or you have to change for your wife, and so our relationship changes. That may be kind of true, but it's not completely true. I'm telling you, it is compounded and more difficult when people don't believe that you're married and you are. And not that you're getting married for people, but you want to establish a relationship from a basis of respect for your marriage. That was for free. We may talk about that later. I don't know. But nonetheless, he was talking about this and he said, "Yeah, now we're cool." And I said, "Well, how did you guys become cool after that moment? Because you've just told me 3 instances where this man was threatening you as a minor." And he
Mhm,
said, and he goes, "Well, he never apologized." And so
mhm.
this is what I said to him. I said, "Yeah, you probably have to live your life without that apology." And he goes, "Yeah, but I can see where he's grown." And I said, "Yeah, that's a good thing that he's grown." I said, "And maybe at some point you may get an apology, but what really had to happen was you had to recognize that he had changed, and he had to recognize that you had changed. And
Yeah,
when that happened, after those violating moments happened of your boundaries being disrespected, of you being dismissed, of you what have you being threatened, then you had to establish a new relationship with him. And whether you all communicated that or not, I've seen this firsthand in my own home.
yeah.
Um, whether or not the apology happened, the behavior had to change for both
Yeah.
of you to realize that you were dealing with a different person.
Yeah.
And that's how the healing begins. And
Mm,
it's not that it won't be a trigger. It's not that there won't be triggers happen all day long. It's
yeah.
not that that won't be a trigger for you if that person does something or says something. But what it does is it helps you to reevaluate the boundary that you have set and this new relationship and new intentionality of
Yeah.
who you want to be going forward with that person and vice versa. So this is really, really, really important as we dive into, or as we provide tools for forgiveness and forgiving of self and acknowledging these traumatic moments in our lives and how we can move forward, whether we reconcile with that person or whether we acknowledge and forgive and move forward. All of that is relevant.
And it's funny that that is the landing point for this series, because I'm thinking to myself, man, almost every morning I need to have a new relationship, at least with myself, because
Mm,
yesterday's man is yesterday's man, and there's new mercies every morning. And so I think that's how the
every
Lord deals
morning.
with us. There's a new relationship with us. Not that the past is something that's, well, it's gone, some of us, but I'm not going to forget. And I think that's half the problem, is that we never forget what someone's done to us.
We don't forget.
Guilty, right? Of
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
chief leader of all of that. But
Hmm.
I love this part because I want to be able to move to this point where there's a newness every time in dealing with my kids, dealing with myself. And sometimes it requires not just from day to day, sometimes it's moment by moment has to be new
Hmm.
because we
Hmm.
screwed up the moment before that. So I think we
Hmm.
got to be careful not to be afraid of that change.
Yeah, absolutely. I love
Yeah.
this. I did want to point out that both of us have on some new merch.
Oh, we do. Show yours, Shell. Show yours.
I'm gonna do a sneak peek. I'm actually dressed today, so if I was going to stand up, I would be okay. But this is our Knight&Craig female version of some of the merch that we'll be releasing as the show is launched, and we'll be able to provide more and more information and tools with this branding. So I'm super excited. Great job on the logo.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And this one is, you don't want this smoke,
Woo!
because some
Word.
folks, you don't really want that smoke, and it now this shirt was done with a twofold meaning. This was Jackson was going to a city council meeting, and they were talking about the
Mhm.
whole thing about cigarette smoking in multi-tenant dwellings. So this we created
Mm,
that to show that, we didn't want they didn't want to have smoking there because of the secondhand smoke for people. That was a problem. But even in dealing with our own lives, in dealing with letting Tyrone out or not in our lives, or Shay Shell from Dago to come through, sometimes we really don't want that smoke. And so that's where we love the shirt for dual meanings, and it is a part of the Dad Collective.
absolutely. I'm excited about your DAC collective too, because I've seen some different what do you call them, specs, or they're not demos. What are they?
Well, now they're demos. There's some new designs that are
Okay.
unreleased yet. Yeah.
All right. Well, I did it right. So I said what I said. So I'm excited to see that. I know my husband has been definitely blessed with the sayings and the customization that you offer at night, not at night, at Carlisle Printing. So we're really excited to see what happens after this, and definitely look forward to many more episodes and many more designs that match those episodes, so that people can begin to embrace the culture and the love that we're really inspiring through connection with family, and getting over, not in a negative way, but dealing with and addressing those things that are keeping us from connecting with people in a very, very real and human way.
Yeah.
We always want to acknowledge our email address. Again, social media and all that stuff is coming later, but Knight and Craig show at gmail.com. If you have any questions, feedback, concerns, topics, ideas, we want to be open to all of that and hear your voice as we continue to grow and spread the message of love and family.
So we'll see you all next week. And next week, Shell, I might have to come over to your house, eat some more, because Lawrence's food was amazing. So shout out to your son. Hey, give your sons
Yeah, the gala.
potato and
Yeah,
company.
that we have the gala.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
And
I was thinking about that because we did want to do some, like, I was literally preparing my breakfast, well, our breakfast, to eat after the show.
Mhm.
And I was thinking, I was looking outside, and we had cleaned everything. Stephen did an amazing job on making sure
Yeah,
everything was really nice for the gala. And I was
yeah,
like, this would be the perfect time to do some shows out in that area. So let's get those
yeah.
on calendar before the weather changes, so
Please.
we can enjoy that ambiance and atmosphere. Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say next week we gonna eat at your house, Dan.
Oh, awesome. Let's do it.
All right. So we'll see you all next week. So when you see us on the outside next time, you'll know why. See you all next time on the Knight and Craig Show.
Take care.